Alright, for your final letterform illustration, you're going to have a choice between two equally difficult projects. They're both kind of trying to get you outside of your normal sort of box where you consider writing or letterforms as sort of one thing. They're both extremely different assignments though, so really hear them out and look at both assignments before you make your choice, because they both have very, very unique sets of skills that they're trying to teach you. Your first choice is the Celtic letter illumination. Illumination is very old and ancient art, back from the days when every book was handwritten. And so when a book was handwritten, obviously there were just artists that were hired to make the drawings and pictures in them, and that was called illumination. So Celtic illumination refers to a specific style of illumination done in books from Ireland, from the Celts, that had a very, very, unique style to them. You've probably seen it before. Celtic knotwork is known around the world. It's highly associated with Irish culture, and it's not that hard to make either. So for this project, you're expected to design your first letter as if it were a Celtic glyph, and that should be illuminated with Celtic knotwork. Now, your knot has to be at least 3 by 3 dots in size, and if that doesn't make any sense, it will. There are some handouts and some exercise sheets I want you to complete before you design your own knotwork. And in those worksheets, I will show you how to make Celtic knotwork, essentially. It's a very simple process, a little formula that you have to follow. And then you can make any kind of knotwork design you want to make based on that simple set of principles. When you make that design, you will design the first letter with Celtic knotwork, and then you'll have to write out a short phrase using a broad tip pen in any kind of classic, Gothic font. You can use any of them. There's one that's specifically Celtic Unicles, and then there's one that's a little bit more contemporary up through the Middle Ages. It doesn't matter what font you use, just so long as you do it in that sort of broad tip hand lettering style. And I'll show you in those slides kind of what that style is. There's not so much a worksheet for that style though, but I will have a packet available for you to practice those letters if you wish. You'll only really have to practice the letters that you want to use for your quote, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously this kind of illumination and handwriting takes years and years of practice to master. Your example is probably not going to be as polished as an actual example. So here's some student examples. Again, you can see the main letter, the first letter is illuminated with knotwork, and then after that students have written out their short phrase using kind of a traditional Gothic writing. And the way I formatted this project earlier was like this long, broad sheet of paper. You can use any size of paper you want. Students did a really poor job of considering the margins. I think the bottom example has good margins, but they didn't quite illuminate enough of the words. And yeah, so you got a lot of concerns in this project, but essentially you're trying to teach yourself this style, and this can be a valuable skill. Say you have a client or somebody who wants a particular cultural style. You got to be able to teach yourself how to do that and imitate it if that's what they want. There are billions of different kinds of styles throughout the world that are associated with all sorts of different indigenous cultures. The Mayans, the Incans. There's Northwest Pacific Indians that have their own specific visual style. So you can consider this along the lines of that, just sort of appropriation or imitation. This is one of the finest examples of Celtic illumination. The Book of Kells has, I can't remember the total number, but there's an awful lot of illumination in this. In fact, each gospel starts out with a single letter or a set of letters that is completely a full page illumination. So, if you zoom in on these, you can see the complexity of the knotwork, the complexity and richness of the design, all done by hand, all in color, just absolutely beautiful drawings. Here's some examples of some illustrated letters. I believe the example on the left is just letter M's. All of these are probably taken from previous illuminations, although you're free to make your own design however you want. And all of them have some kind of knotwork. Sometimes they're incorporated with an animal, sometimes not. It's just knotwork. You can kind of do it whatever style you want. If you want to incorporate an animal, that's completely fine with me. Here's some examples of traditional letter forms. Now, I would like you to try the Gothic letter forms, but you can try Uncial and you can try Fracture if you want. Those are a little bit harder to do. Uncial obviously a little bit cleaner, but again, there's a packet that'll walk you through how to do the Gothic text by hand. Here's an example of a contemporary illuminated text. This is the St. John's Bible. Somebody took it upon themselves, I believe an abbey, or they were commissioned, I can't remember the exact parameters, but they illuminated the entire New Testament with contemporary styles and contemporary practices. So this actually does exist, and the original, I can't remember where it is, but it's at St. John's. I think it's in England, and you can actually buy reproductions of this full to scale, but they're rather expensive. And I just have a couple examples of this because it's a really interesting contemporary take on illumination. If you check out this YouTube video, they talk about it a little bit and show them going through the process. Again, all of that text is handwritten. All of those illuminations and drawings are hand done in the actual book itself. So each of those pages is a unique work of art unto themselves. Your next choice is micrography. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I stumbled across that word, micrography, I guess, when researching this project. And essentially all that means is you're drawing or rendering a subject with the use of words. And I used to call it a cross-contour word drawing. Cross-contours being contour lines that cross over the subject and sort of define the overall form, kind of like a wireframe. And then you know, depending on whether you use cross contours or just use words to shade light and dark values, it's totally up to you. There's a lot of freedom with this project. If you look at the examples, they range from like the super tight and controlled to the really expressive. Essentially, you're using words to create the subject. So you're using your handwriting, or you're drawing words in sort of a specific font or style to represent your subject. Now, I highly recommend you start with a reference and sort of lightly sketch out your reference on your paper. You'll be required to use a full sheet of paper so you have plenty of room to mess around with it. And then the letters can be texture, they can become a pattern. You can use them as sort of like almost a scribble to sort of fill in areas of value. You can make the letters and the words legible and have them relate to the subject, or not, and you know, just sort of write gibberish. But you should be able to tell that they're letters. And then you obviously aren't limited by media. You can use pencil, you can use colored pencil, charcoal, whatever. I highly recommend you use whatever media you're comfortable with, and try to fill the entire portrait with words, even if it's the background. Figure out something clever to fill in the background with words. This is sort of an observational drawing, and then it's sort of a practice in how to use different marks to make value. This is a bit more experimental than the previous one. You got a lot more freedom, so really play around with that. A cross contour, again, just as a reminder, is any kind of contour line that crosses over the form to help define the three-dimensionality of it. So in this drawing of a hand over here, you can see that the lines curve around the thumb and curve around the fingers to give you the sense that they're kind of round and almost like cylindrical in shape. This here is a good example of what you could use your words to kind of do. You can keep them in nice tight rows and sort of make them very legible to kind of represent your subject. I will say that you should probably use more of the subject than just a thumbprint. This is a little bit too simplistic. But if you wanted to draw, like, say, a pair of hands and a face and have the hands be dominant, you could do something like that. Here's some more examples. The one on the left is an excellent example of using the words as value. You can't quite make out the letters unless they're on the arms there, but in the areas of really, really dark shadows, they really overlap their letters quite a lot, to the point where you probably can't recognize what they're saying. But on the arms and parts of the hands, you can sort of see the letters kind of break apart and sort of create lighter values as they break apart. And you get a sense of kind of the three-dimensionality by the way the letters are oriented. The one on the right doesn't do this as much. It's a bit flatter, but you can at least read the letters. This is another solution you could possibly explore. I wouldn't want you to be this flat, but again, you can play around with like three-dimensionality or light and dark in any way you want. Just have fun representing the subject through the use of words and sort of play around with our expectations of what that could look like. Alright, some quick notes on digital micrography. You can draw it this precise, but most of these examples here on out are made on a computer, so don't expect to be that tight and controlled. This is just, I include these images just to give you ideas, really. If you want to do it like this, you can. One way to achieve this would be to trace the word again and again and again, or print it out a couple different sizes and trace it so that you get that nice, tight, controlled drawing from it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, though, because that would be incredibly tedious and extremely difficult, especially if you have to make the word this many times to convey the subject. So, you might incorporate that, or you might not, or you might blend it with your own handwriting. Totally up to you. But take a look at these next couple examples with the idea in mind that they are made on a computer, so they are way more precise than what I expect you to do. And yeah, try to borrow some ideas from them. Some of them are pretty clever solutions or clever ways of handling the words. Yeah. These last couple examples here are done with words that have been collaged and cut out. I don't know if the artist printed these or found them in print and then cut them out. Not quite sure. But take a look at this next slide. That's a close-up of the previous slide. You can tell these are all words that are printed out black or white text on a gray or black background. You can sort of think this way if you want. Instead of drawing the actual letter as black, you could draw around the letter and make the letter white if you want. Totally acceptable solution. But yeah, these next couple of examples are of this one artist and how he uses kind of collage to create his drawings.